The Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.
That's how I feel today, people. I can't talk for long because I think I've got a throat infection or a cold or something, most likely self-inflicted from last week's stag do, so I shouldn't feel too sorry for myself. As I mentioned to you last week, I was in a secret location. That was Madrid, the city I used to live in back in 2004, 2005. Really good weekend. 15 of us celebrating our friend's upcoming nuptials, which will be in March. So all the best to him. He knows who he is. Really good time being back there. I did try my Spanish. It was pretty terrible. That's a task, as you know, from the start of the year that I want to get good at. So I need to keep practicing the Spanish and try and get a little bit better. But let's get on with the show. This week's guest, he is an Olympic gold medalist from London 2012, and it's in canoeing, the C-2 event. It's Etienne Stott. We have a great chat with him. Really interesting insight into the psychology of a top athlete. That is one thing really to listen out to. He talks about a lot of things from failure to success, back to failure, and how he can keep moving forward. It's a fun chat with Etienne, so that'll be with you in just a moment. But before we get to that, I want to also talk about the retirement this week of the wrestler Daniel Bryan, one of my favourite wrestlers ever. I actually met him in 2009, I think it was, in Houston. Really nice guy, and he went on to have great success in the WWE. Most memorably at WrestleMania 30 when he became the WWE World Heavyweight Champion. And that was a real mark that small guys and good guys really can become the best in the world. I mentioned before that I was listening to his audiobook, so I reckon you should listen to that too. And you can do that on Audible. All you have to do is go to audibletrial.com/best, and I'm giving you a 30-day free trial to Audible where you can download a free audiobook. And why don't you make it Yes by Daniel Bryan, a really inspirational story from the young grappler, one of my favorites of all time. Really good book. All you have to do, audibletrial.com/best. But for now, let's get on to the interview. Here is the best in the world. Here is Etienne Stott.
The Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.
Welcome to the Best in the World with Richard Parr. I thought I'd mix it up a bit today, Etienne. What I normally like to do at the end of the show is ask one of our guests their 5 favourite things, where they list maybe it's a favourite movie or a favourite song or something like that. List the 5 things, and then I pick one to find out a little bit more about. And I thought we'd do this first today.
Okay.
So if you don't mind, I'm going to list 5 favourite things, and if you can give me your answer, and then I'll pick one for you to go in a bit more detail.
Okay.
So let's start with favourite website.
Favourite website? Wikipedia, hands down.
Favourite book?
I would say The Lord of the Rings, just that for a quick one.
Favourite country visited?
New Zealand.
Favourite sport other than canoeing?
Tennis.
Favourite musician?
That is a hard one. I like Pink Floyd, let's say that. That's not a musician, they're a group of musicians, but hopefully is that passable?
That is passable, more than passable. So I'm going to ask you, why New Zealand?
I think New Zealand is just an amazing country. Unfortunately, it's so far away. If it could be towed a little bit closer, I think I'd go there all the time, and I'd maybe even try and live there, because it just seems to have everything. You know, it's got beautiful wilderness areas. And you can do all sorts of activities there. You know, there's fantastic canoeing there for starters, and there's the beaches are relatively nearby. You can do the surfing, and there's some great mountains for mountain biking and hiking and walking, and just interesting kind of A land, just all sorts of places to explore. There's not too many people there, I don't think, and you kind of seem like you can be out and around on your own almost and exploring and adventuring, and it just seems like quite friendly people as well, and tasty food and good weather, and sort of a bit of everything. I'd say it's pretty much spot on where I'm standing.
Well, I've never been there, but you've just sold it to me, so...
Well, you should go. Get yourself booked in and get it.
But like you say, I think we need to get EasyJet to kind of fly from the UK or something. That would be great. So you clearly like the nature and the outdoors, and you're a canoeist. How did you get into the sport to begin with?
So I suppose it's all linked together. I started canoeing in the Scouts. So I joined the Scouts when I was a kid. Well, I was in the Cubs before that, and then I went to the Scouts. And the Scout leaders that we had in my group in Bedford, they were just excellent leaders. They were really passionate, canoeists and climbers, and they did all sorts of outdoor activities as it was. So they took us, they were probably pretty brave as well, and pretty adventurous just to take all these kids going crazy out. We did, we did all sorts of stuff. We did hiking and mountain biking and canoeing, kayaking, caving. We did almost everything that you could want to do in the Scouts. And as a kid, it just seemed so awesome and so adventurous that that's kind of what got me hooked in. And then later on I came to kind of appreciate nature and the outdoors a lot more, and I got eventually into kayaking and canoeing was what I decided I was going to do, and I joined the local club, and that's what kind of set me off on my kind of competitive journey. But before that I had like kind of a big grounding in just that sort of outdoor lifestyle, and just enjoying being outdoors and adventures.
How important is it to start as early as possible? Because, for example, I went indoor skiing the other day and I was absolutely terrified. And you've got these kids, they're about 5 or 6 years old, and they have no fear. How important is it to have that lack of fear when you take up something which can be quite scary, like kayaking and canoeing?
Yeah, I suppose for me, I was very fearful as a child, I think, actually, looking back. I wasn't very good at swimming, for example, because I'd had problems with my ears when I was a kid, so I hadn't been able to learn to swim properly and stuff. So I was, and my Scout leaders always kind of rib me and say, oh, you're always crying and scared to go off the climbing thing and all this stuff. And I think that wasn't it, it's that support that you get when you're a kid and you're learning. And also, I suppose, in a kind of a complicated sport, like quite technical sport like canoeing, or probably like skiing as well, it just takes a little while to learn. It takes the best reason to start when you're young is because it takes maybe, 5 or 10 years to get kind of good enough at it to really, really enjoying yourself. You've got to kind of get past, it's a bit like, take the example of surfing. Until you can stand up on your board, you can't actually really have a very great time surfing. So it's kind of a steep learning curve, but once you access that level of ability, then the kind of whole world is your oyster. And I suppose fear does play a part in it, but it's just also kind of technical learning as well. And I suppose fear is just something you come to understand, like white water can be very scary, and there is white water out there that literally terrifies me as well. But as you get more skilled, you start to see what is dangerous and what is not, and what your skills can handle, and that little distance that you can push yourself beyond, what you're comfortable with, and actually grow, and become kind of a better canoeist, and maybe even a little bit of a better person, because you realise actually you don't need to be scared in quite the same way that you was the next time you encounter this. So that's what I think it's all about. But I don't think it was particularly because I was young and fearless. I was definitely not that.
But you said there's many years to reach that level of competence. When did you realise that you were more than competent, that you were Olympic level, that you could be challenging some of the best people in the world at this sport?
Oh, that took actually ages, I suppose. What I did, I suppose, I got to kind of go back, and when I started in canoeing and I started to try and do it more seriously, I suppose I wanted to do something with my kind of life on energy. I just knew that I had to kind of find somewhere to kind of something to be a part of, and up to that point actually I was dead set on becoming an RAF fighter pilot, and that kind of hadn't really worked out. I'd gone to the Air Cadets and found out that having people shouting at you and telling you to do stuff wasn't really my scene. So I decided, kind of fell into canoeing. With hindsight, especially, I seen the fact that, it was just a community of people I really liked. They seemed really cool and friendly, and I got into it like that. And then I suppose that sort of grew and came into being something, kind of morphed into something. And I just sort of thought, well, actually, I'm going to try and be good at this, because I met some of my heroes, very early on in canoeing. It's not a huge sport. Some of the best canoeists in the world have always been British, so I could meet some of these kind of heroes, and I realised, I said to myself almost like, I could be like these guys. I think I can be. And so I started to train more and more. I got quite serious quite quickly. I was kind of 13 or 14, and I knew I was going to be the, 5-time Olympic champion and multiple world champion. And that actually never happened. As I got better, I realised how hard it was going to be, and kind of spent quite a few years in the wilderness, almost kind of getting it kicked out of you. That naive ambition that I had when I was a kid kind of was quickly, or relatively quickly kind of turned into something that you would realise you're going to be in for the long haul. And it was actually only when I switched over from doing single kayaking, which is what most people start off, and then I switched into doing double canoeing with my friend Tim Baillie, who I eventually won the Olympics with. That's when I sort of actually found something. Came under the influence of a coach who was kind of gave us a philosophy, I think, that seemed to click a little bit better with what I was doing. I kind of found myself on more like the right path, and then I thought, actually, yeah, we could start to do something really good here. So that was probably quite late, when I was about 24, 25, as a sort of start of the second wind of my career. And it was only a few years after that we actually thought, yeah, we could be, we started to see evidence that we were one of the best crews in the world and could get involved at the highest levels.
Yeah, because I read that you studied mechanical engineering at university.
Yeah, that's right.
So how were you, that's a tough degree, so how were you able to juggle that and being a competitive canoeist?
I think it was kind of just sheer bloody mindedness, really. I didn't do anything else when I was at university apart from working and training. The sort of student lifestyle thing kind of slipped by very, very easily. Actually, I felt no worries about making that sacrifice, and even to this day, I kind of wish I'd made more friends and seen more of that university life. But actually, I already had the friends that I wanted in the canoeing community, and made some already awesome. Met some people there that I knew they were going to be such cool people to be around, and I thought, I'm just going to train, and a degree. I suppose in some ways I needed to have a degree. My parents were kind of keen on my kind of formal education. I suppose in them days, especially even now, it's good to have something to fall back on, and they, I knew they would not really be happy with me just being a canoeist. So I thought, well, if I get this degree, I'm more or less, then they'll be cool. I won't have them on my back, and I'll be able to go even canoeing even more. So it was very much just a mission, I was kind of on a task from probably fairly early on. Yeah, from when I was about 16, it was like there was a straight line from where I was to being the greatest canoeist the world has ever seen, which didn't really work out that way. But that, university was just an obstacle or a hurdle to be negotiated, and it was very hard work, but it was just one of those things you just got to do, make it through, and then graduated, and then carried on training, and got better and better after that as well.
So how long were you racing with Tim before you headed into London 2012?
So we won the Olympics in our 8th season together. So we teamed up just at the end of 2004 after the Athens Olympic cycle. So we went all the way through the Beijing cycle, failed to get to Beijing, and then went all the way through to London. And did that, and then we stayed together for most of a year, and then a little bit after that, Tim decided he was going to move on, and I carried on in canoeing with a new crewmate, Mark Proctor, who I'm racing with at the moment.
How much did the disappointment of Beijing force you to work even harder, say, for London 2012? Yeah,
looking back, it was absolutely pivotal. I'd say there were probably two really pivotal moments that set us with the necessary kind of approach to winning in London, and Beijing was definitely one of them. The failure there, we actually thought we were good enough in the run-up to the 2008 season. We'd actually done all right. We'd kind of come in, we'd made the top 10 in a couple of races around the world, some big races, and we'd sort of seen that we thought we were good enough actually to go to Beijing. But actually, as it turned out, we kind of completely crumbled under the occasion, and it was a real wake-up call. I didn't feel like at the time; it just felt terrible. But especially looking back, and even a few months down the line, we sort of realised if we were going to carry on, we had to actually sort ourselves out, and there were certain glaring things that we needed to get right if we were going to go forward, because we did not want to carry on and suffer like that again, and suffer a repeat of that, as well as having to go through all that time and effort to actually get nowhere, in inverted commas. So yeah, the Beijing thing was a huge thing. It was very painful, but we could not really have done without it. We would have probably carried on being kind of medium without that, I'd say.
So London 2012, the semi-finals, you come sixth, just scraping into the final, and then you went first, and you provided the quickest time in the end. Did you believe at the time that it would be good enough to win the gold?
I suppose that's the great thing about canoe slalom. It's very difficult. There's no such thing as a goal at the end of the pitch, and you know where that is, and you've got to get there and get the ball into the net. It's very fluid. Sometimes the finals are... the races go faster in the finals, and sometimes actually people kind of punch themselves out and don't do as well as they did in the semi-finals. So when we crossed the line in that final run, we knew as a crew that we'd done a good run. It was very solid and quick, and we had not really any big mistakes. But we looked across, and our coach was kind of like really happy. He was, really jumping around and seemed very excited. And we hadn't actually known our time from the semi-final, but when he sort of shouted, and we were 2.5 seconds faster than the fastest time in the semi-final, we realised actually that was going to be a very big run, because sometimes in the middle of a run, and even immediately afterwards, there's a lot has gone on. You're very much in the moment. You don't really analyse it. You don't really know whether you have gone fast or not. It's very difficult to know. You can sometimes forget a detail that reminds you how quick you were, or maybe a mistake. So we didn't really know how quick we were until we had this reaction from our coach, and then we started thinking, that is actually quite a big run and a good time. And then we knew, there were a lot of other good crews in the final, but we kind of, I suppose even at that point, having done a good run, we thought maybe we might be able to scrape a medal here, because sometimes, the times just tumble and tumble and tumble, and people get faster and faster. But we knew that was a good marker, and I thought, yeah, this could be a good day. And, for us, a medal was a good day at that point, definitely. Yes, I can honestly say that. But we didn't really, there were so many good crews, I suppose, we didn't think we were going to win the gold that day. That's true as well. And
then you did, amazing.
Yeah.
Right in front of your home fans. Did that play any advantage at all, do you think?
I think for us, the home fans was it's a very difficult factor, because again, canoeing is so complicated. There's so many other things going on. I suppose we were quite, in the build-up to London, we were very unsure about how the home thing would work, because canoeing's got you kind of got to ebb and flow with the water, and one of the main mistakes you see people doing is trying too hard and going too fast, and they miss the chance to use the water and glide, and they get tired out too easily. And we thought maybe, if the crowd was that, that 12th man, or whatever you want expression, it would spur us on, and we'd go too fast and get too excited and probably go wrong. So we were quite worried about that, but also a very limited history. We'd done a couple of races in the UK in our career, and both had gone quite well. So in 2009, we did the European Championships, which was in Nottingham, which was at the time our home training centre. And we'd got a bronze medal in the Europeans, which was our kind of breakthrough result, and the first major international medal in double canoes in slalom in the UK. So that had gone well, and we sort of thought, yes, there is something about racing in front of the home crowd. But it's very mellow, it was just like the good feeling that we had, knowing that the crowd were really there to support us, and, the fans did like us, they knew who we were and kind of were supporting us. It was nice, but I could not really attribute, any advantage as such to to the time that we did. I'd say more it was being comfortable in the venue and comfortable in front of that crowd. Even though we'd never experienced anything like it before, it was comfortable experience, really. And that, I think, did help us to race at that level, but mostly it was just down to being very mentally prepared and, having a good run that day. So it's a difficult question to answer.
Yeah. Now, you said earlier that when you were younger, you had dreams of being the greatest kayaker canoeist of all time, and so you must have visualised at some point being on the podium with that gold medal, with the national anthem playing. How did it actually feel when you were there doing it?
Yes, it's very hard to even answer that, because for us it was an extraordinary moment. It's very surreal. Once we had been declared the winners, and it was just, you could hardly believe it. We were sort of in a sort of dream world, and I kind of say to everybody, I could not describe it very easily. It was kind of like the best, and the way I tell people, it was like you're in a movie of your own life. You're watching this film, and it's like, this is incredible, what's going on. And I suppose when I compared it in my mind, it would only be afterwards, because at the time we were just kind of in this whirlwind. We were in the middle of kind of like the eye of the storm. That's almost like what it was. And all around us, people were going absolutely bananas. The fans in the stadium were having a great time. All our support staff and the other paddlers around were really happy for us, and it was really, really strange. You were just kind of stood there going, I've just won the Olympics. This should feel really something, but I don't know. I just feel like, don't know, you could not describe it. So it was a very, very odd experience, and I do remember standing there thinking, I cannot kind of hold on to this moment. If we could only kind of bottle those experiences and kind of just stay there for a little bit longer, but kind of time just, passes and it carries it on, and it carries the experience through. And I'll never be able to relive that experience again, but it was extraordinarily special. But I couldn't kind of capture it any more strongly than I could at the time. And it was just amazing, but it was, over too soon almost, or over quickly enough. And then then everything else happened, and all the other things carry on. So it was a very amazing experience, but very surreal.
Have you ever watched it back?
Yeah, I watched it back. Sometimes I show it, when I'm visiting a school or we do a talk, and we watch the race runs quite often and show that. But then sometimes you watch the podium ceremony, and I suppose we both do look a bit stunned. And the crowd, the crowd was so happy. There was a lot of canoeists in the crowd, and also just a lot of normal fans. It was a very big stadium for a canoe venue, and it was just, there was a massive energy. The crowd had come there to see something cool, and a British 1-2 was basically perfect for them, and so they were absolutely going bananas. And it was a very, very, very special day. Very special time, and to be kind of in the middle of it almost, I sometimes wish I could have been watching it and been in the crowd myself, because I think it would have been extraordinary to see that. It would have been a dream come true for me to see, British people succeeding like that. But for me to actually be that person who delivered that made it seem even stranger. It's just an amazing time, but it's very, very difficult to get hold of, sort of thing.
Yeah, incredible. So after the Olympics, Tim decided to retire, and you're now working with Mark Proctor. How did you feel when Tim decided to retire, and what has Mark brought to your team now?
Well, I suppose when Tim retired, I knew that Tim was, more inclined in that direction. I think, even in the lead up to 2012, we'd both decided, that might be our last Olympics. If we hadn't got selected, for example, to go to the London Games, we'd have probably retired at that point. I think more than likely we'd have just said, we've got to move on, we've got to go and do something else with our lives. I think Tim felt like that after London. And I myself kind of wanted to carry on. So it didn't come as a big surprise, but when he said to me, I've decided I want to stop, it was still a huge, kind of moment. It was still a huge thing, because it's a guy you spend all that time with and have done all that stuff with, and it kind of will never be the same again. He's still my best friend, and I still speak to him a lot, but it was the end of an era, really. And so it was, it's kind of unsurprising, but still kind of shocking at the same time, and kind of unsettling. But I always knew something, one of a crew has to split up in the end. You can't canoe until you're until the grave. So someone has to move on. So it was kind of like that, and I think that I was just happy for him, and hoping that he would do well and have a good life. And I was quite confident that I wanted to carry on canoeing. One of the reasons he retired was I had a long rehabilitation from shoulder surgery that I suffered an injury when in what turned out to be mine and Tim's last race together, and I was in a big rehabilitation. Once I'd got out of that, I started to get myself back on track, and then I teamed up with Mark, and Mark is a really great athlete, very dedicated. He's quite a bit younger than me. He's about 10 years younger than me, I think 9 years younger than me. And he just was, very good canoe singles, a C1 athlete. And he seemed to be, very dedicated, very hardworking, and, kind of very focused on what he was doing. He seemed to take what he was doing very, very seriously. And that is kind of, for me, was almost the main criteria, that you just know someone who's going to be working as hard as you are to get to what you're doing. And I suppose he brought that in, and I suppose for me the main thing is that he brought himself into the crew, so I could actually carry on canoeing, because there was no real way that I was going to, kind of unspecialise from double canoes. I needed to find a crewmate to carry on my career. So to have him coming into the crew meant that I could carry on, and I learned a huge amount about, teamwork and forming, that bond of trust and that relationship in a very short time, because myself and Tim, we'd known each other even before we'd canoed in a crew. We'd known each other since we were 15, so for years and years and years, and we'd kind of grown up naturally in this sport. And with Mark, it was a challenge to actually form a very tight crew and a very strong unit in about a year is the time that we had. And so we learned a lot, and that was a great thing.
The Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.
Informative chat so far with Etienne. We'll have more from him in just a moment. Now, Michael Phelps is one of the best athletes in the world, and to do that, he's had to go through some specific routines, and that really is a power of habit, and that is the audiobook I'm listening to right now, The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg, and you could download that for free. All you have to do is go to audibletrial.com/best for your free audiobook download. That's with audible.com. That's a 30-day free trial with one free audiobook. And if you like it, you can sign on. I've signed on. I get a audiobook every month to listen to. It makes me a little bit smarter, whether I'm in the gym, I'm in the car, I'm walking, wherever I am, I try and listen to an audiobook. You can do that at audibletrial.com/best. Let's get back to Etienne Stott.
The Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.
Now, you mentioned that shoulder injury, and you've been a little bit unlucky the last few years, and that shoulder injury took you out for nearly a year, was that right?
Yeah, I suppose, most of a year, really, yes.
And could you do any exercise during that time, and how did you cope mentally?
I suppose the second time, so the second shoulder surgery I had, which was the one in 2013, was the most serious one. It was one that lasted a year, but in the build-up to London in 2011, I'd actually dislocated my other shoulder, and that turned out to be kind of like a 6-month recovery. And so the recovery that I took in 2013 was actually kind of built on the experience of the previous injury that I'd recovered from. And it was quite important, although this was actually a much bigger job. It was really messed up and had a very serious surgery, and the sort of surgery that sometimes you don't recover from quite right. It was just important to know, the process, and I by then I was experienced, and I knew my own mind and what I had to do to sort of survive, which is kind of what you have to do when you're injured. Sometimes it feels like you're in a kind of a battle for your own life, and it was a case of, using all the support staff that we have. I had a fantastic surgeon and the doctor and the physio working with me, working with the strength and conditioning and my coach to make a really good plan, because I suppose a lot of people, when they find themselves in tough times, it's really hard to be happy. But if you've got a plan and you've got a kind of a way out, a glimpse of light at the end of the tunnel, however you want to describe it. You can kind of winch yourself out of there bit by bit, and even though you might not be completely happy and confident, you've actually got a lifeline to work with. When you've just been chucked at the bottom of a hole and you can't get out, then, you'd be right to feel pretty bad about things. But I had a kind of this lifeline and a kind of inner confidence is maybe a bit strong word, but an inner plan that meant I thought I could get out of it. And so, it was just a case of just training what I could, doing exercise on my other arm, keeping fit and doing all the right things, and then gradually coming back bit by bit, because it was such a long and drawn-out recovery before I could actually be training back at that level. It was just, having that plan and having a sort of vision of what you could do. That's the sort of thing for me that is the most important thing.
So what is that? Is that like exercise bike or walking or?
Oh man, yeah. The exercise bike is probably, unfortunately, a key part of rehabilitation for canoeists, because it's just like your lower limbs and you can keep quite fit like that. And at first, just walking, being outside and getting, the fresh air into your lungs and seeing, being active, just that feeling of moving around and stuff. And I suppose, very quickly could do, even when I was wearing like a sling, you can do like circuit training involving your other arm and body weight exercises and all things like that. So actually there's an outlet as well for the energy that you naturally have stored up, ready to kind of jump around, and you've got to kind of thrash that energy out of you a little bit to kind of feel like you've done something and like that day was, worthwhile and contributing to the future. So it is very good to have that plan, because if you don't have it, you kind of end up, that I do believe actually your energy kind of turns to black if you're not careful, and it turns to bad things and to kind of bad places in your mind. So it's good to have an outlet to direct that, and then I think you can pull yourself out, sort of thing.
And the injury happened in Spain, and you did return to that course and you competed there. Mentally, how important was that to return to effectively the scene of the crime, the place where you got hurt, to move on?
It was quite important, actually. I suppose where we train now in Lee Valley Whitewater Centre in London is probably one of the biggest and most intense, physically, challenging courses in the world. So in the build-up to doing that race in Spain, I'd actually trained quite a bit in London, and if you can survive London, in inverted commas, training day in and day out there for a little while, that you're in pretty good condition. The trick about the river in Spain is it is quite shallow, and it is a bit nasty if you don't do things right on there. So it was a bit of a challenge to go there, but again, it's always hard to make kind of like that a huge leap of faith. But the good thing about having a nice plan and a good rehabilitation plan is that you never really want to make that big leap. You just take lots of small steps towards where you're going, so that each time you're not putting yourself in danger too far. You kind of just test it, then you come back, and then you test it a bit more, then you come back. And so each time you're building up. And so by the time you're coming down to that section where I dislocated my shoulder we did in fact in training that exact move that I hurt myself doing. It's a case of like, yes, it's okay, I'm scared, this is how I hurt my shoulder, but I've done everything I possibly can to make it feel okay, and that I should have grounds to be confident that it's not going to happen again. And then you've just got to convince yourself to go and do it, and it's not actually that big a step, it's just a case of doing it, and you do it and you go, oh, it was fine, I can do it, and now you've done it, and then you can move on, sort of thing. So it's just the small steps creating the big steps is, I suppose, how I would describe a rehabilitation from a serious injury comes on.
But obviously at the World Championships it was a bit more different than that, because you got hit in the side, I believe, in the ribs area, and yet you still raced on. How could you do that? What forced you to be able to do something like that when you were clearly very injured? Yeah,
I suppose I first of all got to correct you slightly, because there was a bit of we were avoiding someone hitting me in the side, which I ended up kind of squeezing myself in a very awkward. So basically, I injured myself as usual. But it was what it was. I mean, the World Championships was part of our Olympic trials, so part of the Olympic trials for Rio 2016, and it was only subsequently that we found out that the muscle was torn and damaged, but we knew there was something really bad and painful going on. But it was like, coming in the build-up, in the days before the race, I was actually terrified of racing. I did think that I wasn't going to be able to make it, and I thought I was going to kind of break down in the middle of a run, and it was all going to go wrong. And this kind of story had developed in my mind, and it was literally the most horrible thing, and I was scared because if we did not compete in the World Championships, it would mean it would be that much more difficult to get selected to the Rio Games. So more or less, it was a case of we have to compete, we must compete. And I managed to kind of, with help from the psychologist and also kind of searching myself, I kind of managed to convince myself that I just had to go out and give it a bash. And like many things, I suppose, it turned out to be less scary than I thought it was, and less painful. It was still really, really painful, but it did not completely, I could actually canoe. It wasn't perfect by a long stretch, but it meant that I could actually get down the run. I knew I could get down the run by the time I'd done my warm-up. I thought, yeah, this is going to work out roughly okay. Whether or not it does or not, I could not decide. But I just managed to sort of get hold of myself and rationally say to myself, this has to be done. We have to try at least. And so we did. And in fact, it turned out to be very, very painful, but reasonably effective. And I think Mark was pulling like double his usual amount that day. And,
wow.
We managed to do a good run and to get through. And that gave us a few extra days before our semi-final. And by the end of the campaign, my side had really deteriorated. But we kind of got what we came for, which was a good placing in the Worlds, and that helped us. That helped us establish our position in the Olympic selection trials.
So, how important is the use of a psychologist? And you mentioned you had built up a story in your mind. How easy or difficult do you think it is to kind of reframe that story, to change that story, or is that once it's in there, you don't think you can?
Well, to answer the first question, I think for me, psychology has been the most important part of my career, actually, and has given me the greatest, growth and insight into my sport. I think, anyone can train, and people can train hard and easy, but actually, when it comes down to, performances on big days and, those kind of peak performances, it comes down to basically confronting yourself inside and convincing yourself to get out on the start line and race, and really confronting. For me, it was a lot about confronting my fears and kind of getting over this idea and understanding as well where these fears come from and addressing them in some cases and learning to live with them in others. So the psychology support that I had particularly, was really useful. And in the build up to London 2012, the work that me and Tim did with the psychologist really helped us to understand what London, what that challenge would be like, and anticipate it, and then build strategies to deal with it. And I suppose, so that's what, over the years, that's been really, really important. I suppose with regard to those stories, yes, I think they are very, very powerful in our minds. In my mind especially, I've got a reasonably decent imagination, and, I can scare myself literally to death. It feels like sometimes, and almost you feel so scared, and different ideas, different stories, not just to do with canoeing, just to do with life, and all these things can be very, very frightening for me. But I've learned over the years to spot when it is a story, and it is really just a story, and it is possible once you realise where it comes from and what the reason for this story is, and you can actually probe it and learn and figure out what it is that's true about that story and what it is that's actually just, a story. And then you can set about dismantling it, finding the truth, and using that truth to actually cut through it all and get the job done, which is what you're there to do. And what you really want to do is just that these big fears and these stories are just holding you back and kind of weighing you down. But once you can kind of be free of them, then you're free to actually go canoeing or do whatever you want to do and express that training, express all that passion and the love that you have for your sport into the water and into the, out there, and put it out there. And that's a great feeling, to be free of that. And I'm very, very grateful that I've learned about that in my career. And I'm really happy that I know about it. And it's still a challenge to do every time. There's always something to worry about and always something to be scared about. But trying to do it each time and learning about it is really cool.
And unfortunately, you weren't able to qualify for the Rio Olympics. I believe you'll be going as a reserve. How have you coped with that disappointment?
I suppose I'm still coping with it. It is very, very tough. like I say, when I missed out, me and Tim missed out on the Beijing Games, we were on the outside of that bubble. In London, we were at the very centre and at the very highest point of the bubble, I suppose. And now I'm on the outside again. It's very tough. The Olympics is it's a black and white world. You're either in the Olympics or not in the Olympics. You've either got a gold medal or you haven't, or you've got a medal and you haven't, or something like that. And it's very easy to feel kind of outside it if you're not involved, and it's really tough. It takes a while to adjust to, and even now I can be honest and say, it's tough to imagine not going to the games and not being able to defend my title in inverted commas. That's real. It is sad, but like a lot of the times, I do believe actually there's an opportunity. I can choose if I'm determined to. I can choose what I want to focus on, and I have got things to focus on that I can be very happy about, like I have won a gold medal at the Olympics in the past, or I have got a good ability in canoeing. Just because I'm not going to Olympics doesn't make me a terrible canoeist. Things like that. Choosing what you're going to focus on to make yourself, it's easy. It's easy to see a dark world out there all the time. You just have to turn the news on if you want to make yourself feel bad and feel like this is tough. But actually, there's so many things we're so lucky to have, and so lucky to be a part of, and so many lucky things that have already happened. I can, if I choose to focus on them, I find that I don't feel as bad about the Rio thing. Although if I choose to, I can still make myself feel pretty sick about it if I want to. But I just don't want to live like that. I want to live going forwards, and I want to live with what I've got in my hands.
You mentioned the news there. There's been a lot of talk about the bad water conditions in Rio. Is that something you would have been concerned with, or is it something some of your fellow canoeists are concerned with?
Yeah, so because the whitewater venue in Rio is actually built a little bit out of the main city, and it actually uses a pumped and clean water supply that goes round and round. It's not actually on one of those lakes or the horrible bits and pieces where the really bad stuff is living. We're actually fairly comfortable about the water quality at our venue, but there's always just the general, it's a bit, there are more, you've got to have your jabs for going out there and all this sort of thing, and the Zika virus, all that stuff. We're a bit unsure, but I think, mostly our venue will be, sound, and I don't think most of the slalom canoeists will be too concerned about that side of things. Now
you're not going to go to Rio. Are you going to continue to race? Are you going to look for Tokyo? Are you going to look to retire soon? Are you going to look to try something else? What will your goals be now?
Yeah, so the interesting thing is that the Rio Games will be the last time that my category is contested. So the canoe doubles category won't be a part of the Tokyo program, and I am a specialist in C2, so I definitely will not be in Tokyo no matter what happens. So I am headed for retirement. There's no doubt about it, and I'm pretty sure in this next year, I will want to move on. It will be time to move on. I've not really made massive plans and ideas about what to do, when that will be and exactly how that form will take. But more or less, every double canoeist in the world is going to be out of a job after 2016 because there's no more Olympics for these guys. So I just know that for me, I have become interested and I'm very interested in psychology. I don't know if this has come across in our talk, but I'm really fascinated by the power of the human mind and the power of people, to grow and to have this, these things that they can do that they don't think they can do. A little bit like what happened to me. I thought I could do it, then I realised I couldn't, and then actually in the end I managed to be able to do something that I think is quite cool, and I'm sort of very interested to maybe get out there and help people realise their potential and maybe take down some of the barriers that we build for ourselves in our minds, and to make greater things possible for all sorts of people. That's kind of my longer term idea. How I'll actually do that, I don't know exactly, but I'm kind of clear that I want to work in the realm of helping people to get more out of themselves, and I'd be very, very grateful if I get the chance to do that, because it would seem like a good way of using my life up.
Well, definitely from this chat, people have got a lot they can learn from you. If they want to follow you, Etienne, on Twitter or any kind of social media, how can we learn more about psychology, more about your career, and more about the rest of the success you'll have in canoeing?
Okay, so that's a good question. I'm on Twitter. My name on that is @Etienne Stott. We have a Facebook page, myself and Mark Proctor If you search for Mark Proctor, Etienne Stott C-2, it'll pop up there. I'm sure you'll be able to find that. And I have a blog as well, which is Etienne Stott's Canoe Slalom blog. I'm not super prolific on any of these platforms, I suppose, but when I try to put out something good on them once in a while, and I suppose it's like one of those things, watch this space. At the moment, I'm very busy training and getting things organised, but I'm hoping in the end, through those channels and just through the, generally speaking, I'm hoping to kind of put something out that people will be able to follow progress. And just following, British canoeing, if you follow on Facebook or on the internet, British canoeing will have lots of news. There's lots of really cool and interesting canoeist characters in our team right now, and a lot of great potential for those stories to develop. You can watch, and keep an eye on it all. And canoeing is a great sport. All I can say is, keep an eye on it and learn about the athletes, and then watch them in Rio and watch them beyond, and you'll probably find it's a really cool sport to know about.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll be looking very closely at Rio 2016. Etienne Stott, thank you for being the best in the world.
Thank you.
The Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.
Thanks a lot to Etienne Stott for being on the best in the world. Clearly the best in the world, because he's an Olympic champion, one of the dreams that we will always strive to do if we are in sports, or whatever the equivalent is in our everyday life, in our job, when we want to reach the pinnacle. There's certainly some interesting things there with Etienne, specifically with psychology. I hope he does go into that field, because it's clear he has a passion for it. And he touched on a lot of subjects which a few of our previous guests have spoken about before, about psychology, about visualization. Maybe listen back to Darren Campbell, for example, Ben Askren. There's so many different people who have talked about psychology and motivation, and they're very good as well. All you have to do is go to the iTunes page, Best in the World with Richard Parr. Also, you can go to the website richardparr.net, and if you have any feedback, go to @Richard_Parr on Twitter, and on the iTunes, please subscribe, rate, review, download. Love to get your feedback. That's the way we can make this show even better. But for now, I'll leave it there, because my throat's still a little bit croaky, as you can probably hear, but I'll speak to you next week. Bye for now.
The Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.